Welcome to the Lake Superior Podcast. I'm Walt Lindelof.
And I'm Frida Wara. We are made stronger by story, and there's no better source than the continent's largest body of fresh water, Lake Superior.
So join us as we highlight the 5 national parks that ring this greatest of the Great Lakes, meet the people, tour the places, and learn about the projects that make these parks and body of water so remarkable.
This podcast made possible with the support of the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation and Media Brew Communications.
Welcome to the Lake Superior Podcast. I'm Walt Lindelof.
And I'm Frida Wara.
You know, Frida, you were setting this up for this chat today, and I could just tell you're really excited by this. You did sort of a preliminary conversation with our guest and some really fun stuff here.
One of the things I love to do, Walt, is to kayak. I learned to kayak in Lake Superior. It has brought me some crazy places, and I've had a chance to paddle maybe about, well, with the circumnavigation of Isle Royale, maybe another couple hundred miles. I've paddled from Big Bay to Grand Marais and up on the North Shore in Canada, and just some special places. In fact, I don't know where else you can go in the lower 48 where you can be gone for a couple of weeks and not see another soul.
Absolutely. And today we're talking with Maddy Marquardt, who is a kayaking guide, a kayaking aficionado on Lake Superior. Maddy, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having me.
We're really actually happy to have you here this today to talk about this because we're talking about Lake Superior, of course, and just tell us a little bit from your perspective. What do you remember about the first time that you saw Lake Superior?
You know, it's actually funny because I don't have a clear memory of the first time I saw Lake Superior. I was very young, and we were driving by me and my family on the way to Wisconsin. So I actually don't remember that first time, but I do remember sometime in college, my brother and I came up to visit the Pictured Rocks on a camping trip, and we backpacked along the shore a little bit, and I remember that was just really incredible. We did the Cove section of the Pictured Rocks, and it was a glass calm day, and it was hot out of all things, so you could actually swim in the water. And I remember we were the only ones on that stretch, and it felt like we were way farther away from Michigan and the suburbs we grew up in than we actually were. And I thought that was really cool.
Because, Maddy, you grew up in Lower Michigan, in the Lake District, there around Lake Orion, and I can relate to that because I'm a gal from Oakland County myself. But you learned to kayak first, I think, from your uncle on Lake Winnebago in Wisconsin?
Yes, I did.
And how different is that from the Big Blue up here?
Yeah, so I think I was really young. I must have been 10, and my sister was 8, or maybe we were 12 and 10. But he had a friend who was big into sea kayaking and did a bunch of Apostle Islands trips. So he took us out in kayaks on Lake Winnebago, and we were in light waves, which felt huge to me at the time. Probably it was like a half foot. But Lake Winnebago, learning there, it's super different. The water's warm. You can actually be in the water for a long period of time, and the risks are completely different on a lake like Lake Winnebago. You can always swim to shore if you need to. On Lake Superior, you might be next to cliffs. If you fall out, you can't scale a cliff to get out of the water. So a completely different ball game, but definitely a doable transition for anyone who's looking to eventually paddle Lake Superior, starting on little lakes and working your way up and taking the appropriate training courses. It's definitely something to add to your bucket list and set your sights on. We're
talking with Maddy Marquardt today, who is a kayaking guide, a kayak instructor, an aficionado, as we're saying today. This kind of ties into, Maddy, something that you were talking about is, what would you share with someone that is thinking about going kayaking on Lake Superior, first timer? What's something for them to keep in mind?
I would definitely keep in mind that the water is going to be colder than any of the other lakes in the region, and Lake Superior is functionally an inland sea. It creates its own weather patterns. It's capable. I think the largest recorded wave was around 32 feet. That's about the size of a house. Mm-hmm. You really don't want to be out in that. And probably if you launch on a sunny day, you won't be, but you can get lucky a lot of times before you're in big trouble. And it's actually funny you called me an aficionado. I would not say I'm an aficionado, and I would say probably the biggest risk of Lake Superior is thinking that you're an expert on kayaking or thinking you're an expert sailor, and not understanding that the lake is the boss out there. We like to say up on the shores of Superior, and I think that really holds true. You just need to respect the lake and kind of use your eyes and your gut when you're out on the lake a lot. And I would say probably the single biggest thing for anyone who's thinking about kayaking Lake Superior is to have several exit plans in case, and just really consider the gravity of what you might be undertaking.
That's a very good point. I think what I'll use is the word enthusiast. How's that?
Sure. I am a kayaking enthusiast for sure. Aficionado, I have a lot of room to grow still as a kayaker, and I think most people do.
If I may ask, you sound younger. How long have you been doing this? I hate to be a cad, but how old are you?
I'm 25. I'm 25, and I've been guiding for three-ish years. I'll be guiding again part-time this summer. But I mean, I really do love the lake. I don't think experience on it can be measured in years. I don't think however many years of paddling experience I have it doesn't prepare you for Lake Superior. Just because you have years of kayaking experience on Lake Winnebago doesn't mean that you're ready to go paddle out to Devil's Island tomorrow. It's a different kind of undertaking.
And you bring that up in such a good way because, Maddy, pictured rocks for your very first opportunity to be on the lake in a kayak. That is big water because, as you mentioned, with cliffs, but also your time in the Apostles, and there are the cliffs there are the caves as well, but you've got a lot of crossings to do. So when you find yourself on, say, the lee side of an island, and then all of a sudden you come around to the other and you're facing those winds right there, I'm sure you've had that experience, and just helping people understand that the weather changes. Yes,
I think that one of the biggest issues with, specifically at the Apostle Islands, the Myers Beach paddle, is it starts off in a protective bay. So when you're launching, you aren't in the waves you're going to be in when you reach the cliff. And by the time you reach the cliff, it's going to be a mile swim back to the shore if you capsize in those waves. And we have calamitous waves too, which will hit the cliff and bounce back out. And then you have waves that double up or rebound waves. So you've got to be thinking about the way that water behaves as well as the waves you're in.
We're talking with Maddy Marquardt today, who is a kayaking guide, an enthusiast of kayaking on Lake Superior and on the big lakes. I'm hearing something here, Maddy, that you're lured by the lake. You're lured by its pristineness, its size, its scope, and everything. But what I'm really hearing also is not only do you have a respect for that, but you have a respect for the volatility, the challenges that this lake can present. What makes you want to keep going out on it? What makes you keep want to going out there and not on maybe something that is in effect a little bit simpler?
That's a really great question. I think probably because 8 times out of 10, I have an incredible experience out on the lake. There is no feeling in the world like taking a nice slow paddle along Lake Superior and really getting to appreciate a shoreline for the sake of that shoreline and like for yourself. That being said, for in 10 experiences, I'm going to have 2 that are a little bit of a harrowing paddle. I've got a ton of stories, both guiding stories and personal trips, where it's been like, oh man, that was kind of scary, wasn't it? But those other 8 times, it's really incredible to get out there and experience the lake, to see a bald eagle catch a fish in front of you or something like that. I think it's just one of those things that once you have a taste of that, of Lake Superior, and you kind of get to know the natural and cultural history of the area, there's just so much to dive into. And it's kind of like Frida was saying, it's one of the only places in the lower 48 where you can be in nature for that long and experience so much varied shoreline up on this one massive body of water.
Maddy, let's talk a little bit about equipment, because I think for me, I know I want to see someone in a full-on sea kayak. I get really nervous when I see somebody out in a rec boat without a spray skirt on, and certainly without water for clothes for immersion. That it can be really hot. You and I know it. And it's really bad when it's so hot and you're saying, no, I'm going to stay in this dry suit, or I'm going to stay in my immersion clothes, which can also be your wetsuit. Just a little bit of experience about that, because I know you've come around Isle Royale at times when you're glad that you had every piece of clothing you had.
Yeah, I mean, I could have used even more clothing on Isle Royal. Ask the hypothermia logs.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think immersion gear is one of those things where, especially on those hot days in August when it's 90 degrees, you don't realize when you're swimming at Little Sand Bay in the Apostle Islands that the water's going to be warmer in the bay, and then you maybe you decide to cross the Sand Island in your wreck boat, which people have done, and it has not gone well for them. But you really need a wetsuit, because if you get in the water, you need to at least stave off hypothermia long enough that you can get back into your boat. And that's the other thing. That's why you need a sea kayak as opposed to a recreational kayak. I don't know if you've tried to get back into a recreational boat as it starts to sink, but it's not great. A sea kayak is going to be ideally greater than 15 feet in length, and at each end, at the bow and stern, it will have a sealed bulkhead or pocket of air. That basically means even if your kayak capsizes, you're out of your boat, you can still get back in and that boat will float. Or worst case scenario, if you're in a dry suit, you can just hang on to that boat in the water and hopefully have a marine radio to call for some help. Worst case scenario.
We're talking about, go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, you're fine. A recreational kayak, it doesn't have the same, it's not going to handle the waves as well. But also, if your recreational kayak capsizes, there's a chance it's going to sink and you won't have anything visible to hang on to in the water. So that's one of the biggest things I always tell people is if I'm out on Myers Beach and someone is going to launch with a recreational kayak, either way, I'm like, all right, well, if you only remember one thing, if you flip, hang on to your boat. That's it. If that's the only thing you're going to take away from this, take away that.
Talking with Maddy Marquardt today, who is a kayaking guide, a kayaking enthusiast, a fan of kayaking on the big lake. And it sounds, Maddy, like the use of common sense when it comes to just boating in general. If you're going out on the big lake, go out with a boat that can handle it. Now, I understand that you are a bit of a writer, and you have a writing project that is a field guide. Can you share a little bit with us about that?
Yeah, I absolutely can. I recently wrote a book, Hidden Gems of the Northern Great Lakes. It's a trail and paddling guide, kind of focused on the Grand Traverse region in northern lower peninsula of Michigan, and then the upper peninsula of Michigan as well as kind of the Apostle Islands, northern Wisconsin, and then the North Shore as well, and a little bit on Isle Royal. Essentially, I put together this guide because I have a community on Instagram, and a lot of people reach out to me and ask for tips about, okay, well, I want to go and paddle the Apostle Islands with my kids. Is there a safe spot to do that? If we can't paddle, where can we hike? Or it's not the Apostles, the pictured rocks and that kind of thing. And there's not really an effective way to give safety advice and tourism advice in a text message, essentially. And I really wanted to capture that feel of when you are guiding a group, getting to know someone a little bit and being able to give them that personal advice, like, oh, okay, well, your kids are 12 and 13, and they like to hike, but they don't want to hike too far. You guys might like the Houghton Falls Trail. I wanted to capture that idea of giving advice in person in a trail guide.
How can people find it if they want to look at it?
Right now, you can find it on Amazon. It's available for pre-order. It will be out May 1st. Only the ebook is available for pre-order. The print copy will also be out May 1st, but it's not listed yet. I also have independently printed copies, and there will be 50 available each month directly through me. You can contact me on Facebook or Instagram, and I will hook you up with a print copy through me.
Maddy, you have been to, out of the 5 national parks on Lake Superior, you've been to 4 of them. And I was just going to pick your brain as you think of maybe traveling east to west, what you remember about Pictured Rocks, the Apostles, up at Grand Portage and over at Isle Royal, just some of the gems out of those parks.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in the Pictured Rocks, I think my favorite spot is the hike up to Spray Falls, especially if you can go at sunset, just because as the sun is setting, the waterfall kind of lights up, and it's just lovely. And you manage to get out there on a warm enough day, there are some of the best little swimming holes probably in the whole world. I was very lucky. It was just me and my brother when we hiked that trail. We didn't see a single other person. I don't think it's like that anymore, yeah. But that is definitely like the best part of the Pictured Rocks, in my opinion. Apostle Islands, oh man, where to even start? Every island is so great. I am actually partial to Oak Island. I have seen so many black bears there, and they're adorable and a little bit scary every single time. But probably my favorite thing about Oak Island is if you circumnavigate it, in the back, in the northeast corner, there is one big sea cave you can sneak into. And in the back of that sea cave, I think it's actually new there's a skylight where the back's caved in, so you can actually see up into the forest from the cave. That's a hard one to get to. You'd have to be out on an overnight trip pretty much to get in there, but that is probably the coolest spot in the Apostle Islands, and I don't know anybody else who knows about that one.
I love that. Thank you. Now, we're probably going to have tickets for admission now after we've released that. But I have camped on Oak Island many times, and I got to go find that. That's on the list.
Yeah. It's a cool little spot. You can sneak through this crevice in the back, and it's all of a sudden you're like in the forest, but on the water. It's very cool. I think that might have just opened up this past year because I know a lot of overnight guides who are like, what in the world are you talking about?
How about with like Isle Royale and Grand Portage and I mean all of these other areas that you visited? What are some of the things that have really stuck with you there?
I mean, with Grand Portage, the best part of the experience, it's a beautiful park, but getting to talk to the people who work there is the most exciting part for me because these people, the park staff there really care about the preservation of Ojibwe culture. And there are just such incredible artifacts there. And if you can find someone who's been curating those artifacts to talk about them, you are going to hear just the best told stories ever. It's going to tell you so much more than the plaques will. The plaques are great, but if you can flag down whoever is on staff that day and ask them some of these stories about like the buttons that fell off of British soldiers or the beadwork on some of these moccasins, you're going to get like just a rare treat. It's a really cool spot to check out. Isle Royale, you can't go wrong. I had somebody ask me today, they're like, okay, well, should I go to Wendigo or Rock Harbor? And I'm like, both if you can.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Isle Royale is one of those places where no matter where you go, you're going to have an incredible experience. It doesn't matter what you do. It's going to be magical. There's not any one place that's better than the rest. People ask me my favorite campsite, and I'll be like, Merritt Lane, no, Caribou Island, no, Little Todd Harbor. The whole island is phenomenal.
But when you are kayaking there, again, it's like Pictured Rocks and some areas at Apostles. Be well aware that when you make that move from Huggin Cove to Little Todd Harbor, there's no place to get out. So you gotta definitely make sure that the buddies you're paddling with, everybody's in sync, because you can really only paddle as fast as your slowest member of the group.
Yep.
You don't want to get yourself spread out there.
Yep, you don't want to get spread out there, and bring a tow belt just in case. There's two.
We're talking with Maddy Marquardt today, who's a kayaking guide, a kayaking enthusiast on Lake Superior, sharing some of her adventures and some of her stories. And, the question is you're reflecting on a lot of things, Maddy. Is there something you're looking forward to during this upcoming summer season?
Yes and no. I don't have I have a lot of tentative travel plans in the area for the summer season, but again, it's COVID dependent. Right now, I would really like to backpack the border route trail up here, up on that northern border with Canada. That's not really in the Lake Superior region, but I would love to spend a couple of nights out there. I don't think I'll do the whole thing, but I'm definitely looking forward to that. And I'm paddling up on the North Shore. I haven't paddled Tetagooch State Park yet, and I'd really love to do that. There are supposed to be some really cool spots there. I'd really like to get out there on a nice wavy day. I heard there's a couple of chutes you can kind of slide through if you plan on doing any surfing.
Maddy, at 25 years old, she said, Walt, that she was looking forward to do some backpacking. Now, I have to tell you, as a kayaker, I would much rather float my load than put it on the back, on my back and carry it. So, Maddy, you really, and you're inland when the bugs are there. So I'm going to say, just get out on the water, girl.
I respect that, but you gotta have a few character building experiences in order to really appreciate how great it is to kayak.
I think your character building came when you tried to circumnavigate at Isle Royale last fall. Can you share a little bit about that? Maybe you might not want to talk.
No, absolutely. I think this is actually a great thing to talk about because myself and 4 other experienced paddling guides decided it would be a really awesome idea to cross over to Isle Royale from Grand Portage in the fall, the stormiest month of the year. When you're young, you do silly things sometimes.
Apparently,
and we
yes.
we actually had a great trip for the first 12 days, and then we got nailed on that 12th day with freezing rain. And again, I didn't have a dry suit, which led to me being hypothermic on the island. So again, I want to emphasize, we knew what we were doing. We made it 12 days out there, and we still ended up in big trouble and ended up not circumnavigating the island. So I think kind of a funny story in hindsight, but it's definitely one to reflect on it, both as a guide, but also I think it's a good thing for everyone who's considering kayaking and calls themselves experienced to know that the lake does not care how many years of experience you have. If she decides it's going to be 5 to 6 foot nor'easter and freezing rain, that's just what you get that day.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you said you got into some big trouble. How did you get out of the big trouble? Everybody wants to know that, too.
Because remember, at the time that Maddy was there, Maddy, the park was shut down, correct? I mean, there wasn't regular folks left on the island except the cleanup crew.
Yeah. Again, it's a timing choice, not so hot on our part. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. There were a lot of fishermen still out on the island. So actually, when we emergency landed at Fisherman's Cove, a couple of people came in to. We looked fine when we were doing the crossing over, so they came to be like, "What are you guys doing out here? How'd you get here?" And I happened to be shivering in the tent at the time, and they fed us hot dogs. Thank you very much, guys. And then it gave us a ferry back to Wendigo. And then the next day we were trying to basically cross back over and kind of got the okay from Marty, one of the rangers, that he thought we could make it. At this point, I'd been hypothermic the previous day, and probably if I hadn't been, we would have been fine. But it's one of those things where in my head, I knew that being hypothermic saps your energy.
Right.
And we didn't really experience that until we were about 9 miles into our crossing back in 6-foot waves, and I just could not keep up. So we kind of, as a group, made the decision that even though we could have probably made the crossing back, even though we could have emergency landed in Canada, we were pretty sure we were going to jail if we landed in Canada.
Sure.
Even if we could have done that, it was better to call for help before it became a life or death situation. So we went ahead and we had a Garmin InReach, and we had a marine radio. So we called for help, and Marty came and got us, bless his heart.
Marty Olgren, by the way, he's back on the island already. He's doing some work. Yeah. I think he went back.
Tell him I'm going to paddle back over and say hi
for that pot roast, right?
For the pot roast, and that's the best part of the story. Is the night before, Marty came down to Wendigo and was like, "Do you guys want some pot roast and come up and chat?" And I'm a very proud person. I'd already cooked dinner also. We said no to the pot roast because we were trying to tough it out. We should have gone up and had that pot roast and had a good long chat about that forecast the next day, because things would have gone differently. And I think ultimately for all four of us, lesson learned, especially for Andy and I, who were kind of in charge of this trip, because I think part of the reason all of this happened was poor communication between us as well, both about how I was feeling, because I wanted to be the tough girl. I wanted to tough it out. I think we'll be doing things differently next time. Probably not in October for a start.
Like you said, the lake does not care. So when the time hits, it's gonna do what it wants to do, and that's certainly important to keep in mind.
And just to let our listeners know here too, Maddy, so from Wendigo back to Grand Portage, is that about 28 miles?
No, well, only if you do your bearing incorrectly.
Okay.
It's about 15 to 16, I think. Well, I guess because you have to go into the bay. I think we did do 26 miles the first day when we came in. Yeah, and again, I want to hyper-emphasize here, we were experienced paddlers, and this still happened to us. The reason we did not die out there is because we were able to do a rafted tow. We had the equipment to make a call for help. We had the training to stay kind of calm in a situation and recognize that it could be in an emergency in 3 hours, even though it didn't feel like an urgent emergency right that second. And you know what? I think when they took my temperature in Grand Portage, I was down at 96, 95, which is that's a chilly core body temperature.
Yes, it is. We're talking to Maddy Marquardt, who is a kayaking guide, a kayaking enthusiast on Lake Superior. It's been a pleasure having you on to talk with you today. How can people find out more about these various adventures? How can they find out more about what you're up to and where you've been?
You can check out my website anytime. I maintain a blog semi-regularly. I'll post 3 times in 1 week and then not again for a month. I'm much more regular on Instagram. You can find me at MADDYMARQ, Maddy Mark. And I try and make a point of replying to everyone who messages me. So if you have a question, you can ask me directly.
Well, we appreciate your updates, your information, your passion. It's coming through in this conversation in particular that you love it. It's beating you up a little bit, but you're still kind of in the whole thing, saying that's part of it all, the experience, and you're going to keep doing this, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm going to keep doing it. I think it's important when you have experiences like what we had on Isle Royal to evaluate what went wrong, take it as a learning experience, and then also kind of share those experiences so other people hopefully do things differently. Hopefully.
Maddy, have you written about that experience? Is that in your blog?
That is not in my blog. I'm working on a longer piece detailing that on Isle Royal in general.
Please let us know when that's ready because we'd love to share that with our listeners as well.
Sure.
It's so important. I love to say about this podcast that we're made stronger by story. Mm-hmm. And for paddlers, when we get together, it's so important to sit around that campfire and start to share the stories because for you, just sharing the idea of one of your pieces of equipment is a tow belt. And when you said that you did a rafted tow and lots of probably some conversation here that first-time paddlers or those that are just looking at the sport are saying, okay, that's it. I'm not trying it. We don't want that at all because it is so beautiful. It's probably one of the most aesthetically pleasing things you'll ever do in your life. But to be with someone on that water with Maddy's experience that can help you, knows when that lake starts to look like a chop, you know, the eyes are out there on that horizon and you can tell. Walt grew up looking at Lake Superior every day as a kid too. So you know it can change in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and we appreciate you sharing your stories today, Maddy. This has really been a pleasure having you on with us. And certainly let's talk again sometime soon, especially maybe when you get some more adventures under your belt this summer.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on.
Bye-bye.
Maddy Marquardt, kayaking guide and enthusiast. Frida, you know, this has just been a pleasure to talk to her over these last few minutes and talk about it. But like I said to her in the conversation, I said, she's got an understanding, she's got a respect, she's got experience. She says it's a worthwhile experience, but you can't go into it without the proper respect for what Lake Superior is.
And it's really good that she just shared with us, you know, when you make mistakes, you learn from those mistakes. And thank goodness she wasn't alone. That's the other thing, that you should never paddle Lake Superior. We have a saying, whenever at sea, no less than 3. Oh, because if you are kicked out of your boat, you have someone that can help you, but also someone else that can go to rescue. If your paddle goes flying, or maybe in a big wind, you could actually lose your boat too. Yeah. You know, it can be, you've got to swim after it. So it's just important to be with someone that's had that experience.
And the idea is, don't be afraid of Lake Superior. Respect Lake Superior. Visit these parks around Lake Superior that we talk about here on the podcast. Learn from the crew, the staff, and everybody there. Learn from some of the other visitors and enjoy Lake Superior, but respect Lake Superior.
And I really believe if you are coming to have a first-time kayaking experience, you need to go with a guided service.
Yes.
They've got the equipment. They'll make sure that you are dressed properly. They're going to be there to help you every step of the way.
Well, that's going to do it for this latest podcast here at the Lake Superior Podcast. We appreciate you listening in today. We've had a great time bringing it to you. Hope you have had a great time listening as well. I'm Walt Lindela.
I'm Frida Wara, inviting you to get out there and get your gaze out there on that beautiful big blue and go explore your national parks. And the 5 national parks on Lake Superior are waiting to see you visit.
Thanks for listening.
The National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation, NPLSF, is the only official nonprofit 501c3 fundraising partner of the National Park Service for all 5 U.S. national park sites on Lake Superior.
To learn more about NPLSF projects and programs, you can visit the website at nplsf.org or friend them on Facebook.
I'm Frida Wara.
And I'm Walt Lindela. Thanks for listening to the Lake Superior Podcast.
This podcast made possible with the support of the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation and Media Brew Communications.